Yay! That's always the best. So I want to share something about the Torah portion, of course, but I also want to say a special welcome. We have a number of guests that are here to celebrate 2 young people becoming B'nai Mitzvah, and we're looking forward to your leadership tomorrow morning and guiding us through our service and hearing your Torah and experiencing all of that. And we also have a number of people that are taking on this ancient custom of shul shopping. This is when congregations introduce ourselves to people that might be new in the community or around for a while, but are trying to figure out if there's a home for me in a place like Congregation Har Hashem. And we're really glad that you are here. We have some friends that you can talk to. We have a lot of people coming for a lot of different reasons. Some it's to find a message, others it's to sing. Some want to meet our new youth director who started yesterday. There's a lot of things that are happening in our community, and we're really glad that all of you are here for tonight. Let me share a little bit of Torah with you. And on one level, you would think that this is kind of an easy one, because the Torah portion is Va'et Chanan. I know that gives it all away, but I'll keep going. So in this Torah portion, we have the text of the Shema. And the Shema that's a big deal. We've heard about this a lot over the years. Even if we didn't really hang out much or listen much in religious school, not me, we had a sense that the Shema was really important. If you grew up in a Reformed synagogue years ago, years and years ago, you might have heard that the Shema is the watchword of our faith. I have no idea what that means, but I do know it's important. But why could it be so important? Well, I love this idea that there's a sense of unity around the Shema. The words are Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God is our God, and there's just one. And there's debate about how do we translate that. I'll talk about that in a second. But we know that there's one God. We know that there's a message for the people, ancient people of Israel, and that has gone even far beyond the community of Israel. There's a sense that there is only one God. Back in the days when the Torah was being written, they had a sense that there were many gods, and they weren't very good, and they would lead you to do really naughty things. So you should stick around and follow the God of Israel, especially if you were part of the children of Israel, because it would be good for us. Because there was a goal of creating something better in such a harsh world. There was this sense that what was going to happen next in this land once they get there was going to be different than every other place. And there was going to be a society where everybody was going to be welcomed, including those that were vulnerable. And how do we take care of our own and actually follow through on it without just saying the words? This is what we were supposed to be, a place where justice and compassion was going to be balanced. It's an incredible story. Shema Yisrael, listen to all of you Yisrael, all of you people of Israel. There's something important here. There's only one God, and we're all connected. And at some point they realized it wasn't just Israel that was connected. Everybody was connected. It wasn't that those ancient Israelites had a God and the other folks had a God. At some point there was a sense that there's one God of all, and you don't have to be Jewish in order to have that encounter. But if we are, and if we're making choices within the Jewish community, there's a perspective to share. So what is the perspective of Shema Yisrael? Well, we can debate whether there's only one God or it's only God, God alone. They mean different things. And I already gave you a hint about it. Back in the day, they thought there were more options. But at a certain point, we let go of that idea. This wasn't the best of others. This was truth, that there's one source. Call that source whatever you like. In Hebrew, in this text, there's 2 terms. We know Adonai, but then in the Shema, right, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, the Eloheinu also has a term for God, which is really Elohim, right? Eloheinu is our God, but the term for God itself is Elohim. So we actually have 2 terms for God in this one line. One is Adonai and one is Elohim. So the rabbis of old, of course, were going to figure out, well, what's the difference? Why do we have these different references to God? Because there's only one God. We just read it, right? You heard it. One God. What could it possibly be? Well, Over the years, there was an understanding that it is the same God, but Adonai is a term that refers to God's mercy, to a sense that God is compassionate. And Elohim is sort of the stern part, the strict parent part, right? Maybe more ruler kind of an idea. Adonai, Elohim, a sense of mercy, and the stricter ruler, judge. Okay. Personally, I think we can use both. Otherwise, I can get away too much if it's just a compassionate parent. I need somebody else who's going to keep me in line once in a while. I'm okay with both of those ideas. And by saying that we believe that God, or the Kadosh Baruch Hu, or Adonai, or Elohim actually possesses both of those kinds of characteristics, we proclaim that all things that happen in the world actually originate with God. And I don't want you to be confused by that statement. I do not mean that God controls our actions. I don't. And for folks that are hanging out here a lot, you know that I don't. I also think that actions have consequences. And there is a system out there that is going to kind of restore some balance when there's some chaos. And that could just be nature, but there's a source behind it. That could be how our bodies tolerate something that's difficult. That's sort of how they've been created. I don't believe that God is behind every action, but I do believe that every action has God's presence in it. Years ago, when I was thinking about this whole rabbinical school gig, there was a book that was very popular. I was the end of high school, into college. And the rabbi from California, his name was Harold Schulweis. And his book had a tremendous impact on me when I was younger. He takes up this idea from our ancient rabbis and looks at Elohim and Adonai. And he says Elohim, that strict part, Elohim is like the laws of gravity. If you let an apple go, and it's going to fall to the ground because that's the way that the law of gravity works. If an earthquake occurs, and buildings may be destroyed because that's how the laws of physics operate. Likewise, if you break a law, there's going to be some kind of consequence that's going to probably follow. Adonai, on the other hand, Adonai stands not for what God is, but for what ought to be. Not what is, but what ought to be. Elohim prescribes punishment in the Torah. Adonai teaches transformation. Elohim creates the world and all of the difficult and dangerous parts of it. Adonai inspires human beings to respond to those dangers with integrity and strength and resilience. Elohim creates the forces of nature in the world that can hurt us and to see natural events that can wound us. Adonai brings rescuers who risk their lives to save other people and help others to cope. Elohim is about the facts, and Adonai is about the faith. I think that's how we can look at the two. We know that there's cause and effect out in the world, but I've always appreciated a phrase that says you can't put two tuchases in the same seat. Have you heard that before? It's one of my favorites. You can't put two tuchases in the same seat. If you don't know what a tuchas is, ask somebody later. That one knows. You can't always inhabit the same space without some kind of bumping into another and some kind of damage happening. And frankly, moral delinquency is going to affect the innocent as well as the guilty. But the characteristics that's inherent in this Elohim do reflect that reality. Natural order, laws in motion. But where would we be if there wasn't a sense of Adonai, of compassion, of showing up when somebody is feeling vulnerable, of being there, not necessarily able to fix it, and still can change everything with presence? Where would we be without the belief that our lives matter, largely because of the examples we set for other people? Where would we be without the faith that after we're gone, our love and kindness can continue? I think both views of God are necessary in order for us to make sense. And what we try and do, at least in this space, is to try and make sense, not just to give the teaching, but to help us figure out how to move towards that transformation, how to find meaning, how to build up those resilience muscles. How do we have a sense of a creator and perhaps have an expression of gratitude? Gratitude even in the midst of our grief. Can we do that? And if we don't find that path so naturally, well, that's where faith is supposed to step in and say, hey, I've got a path. In fact, I've got a few dozen of them. Let's try and figure out how to make a difference in the world. How can we build ourselves up, not just so that we can feel strong, but that we can build others up. Make that contagious. Can we do that? Can we figure out how to do that? You know, this Shabbat is called Shabbat Nachamu, because in the Haftarah reading for tomorrow morning, it's going to say, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, bring comfort to my people, God says through the prophet Isaiah. It's a very stirring thing because just last week, we marked on our Jewish calendars a calamity that happened to the Jewish people, the destruction of the first and second holy temples. Now, for us, that sounds like ancient history, but on Jewish memory, it still runs deep and it's personal. A lot of us might have a connection maybe to the Shoah, to the idea of Holocaust and anti-Semitism, but before that, the thing that helped us to remember hurt and catastrophe and calamity was actually the loss of the temples in Jerusalem. I'm kind of I'm shook really by the idea that immediately afterwards, after an experience of harshness in our memories, we have this reading about God comforting us. So God shows up for us. We're always supposed to show up for God. Well, I actually think that God shows up for us not so that we show up for God, but we show up for each other. That's how I think it's supposed to work. And what we do here is to remind us of that, because we have a problem about forgetting important truths. I think everybody does. It's kind of the human way, which is why I need this place. I need this place. Which is why I think lots of other people need this place, not just join this place. I think we need it to guide us to figure out who we ought to be. How can we be real and present? So, Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami, comfort my people, comfort them, says God. No matter what harshness of realities we can be, I think God comforts us, both with Elohim and with Adonai. And the greatest lesson I ever learned from Harold Schulweis is that we have a sense of being godly. We too can bring both of those qualities in. And if we act godly, not to think we're God. I know a few people like that. That's not what I'm talking about. If we act godly and walk in God's ways and express through our character those Elohim and Adonai qualities, I think we do nothing less than change the world, one soul at a time. So that's what we do here. That's what I wanted to tell you. That's what we're striving for. And afterwards, we can tell, for those of you who are our guests, the activities and the programs and the other ways to connect, make a difference. We'd be glad to tell you that story. But I think the story starts with Torah, and it starts with our memory, and it starts to understand. It starts with our figuring out questions about how to bridge this gap between this God that, as kids are told, is so far away from us, when I think is right here where we're breathing. So, let's take a breath. Let's turn back to the text. We move toward our conclusion.